Welcome everybody, this is Denny and Karl with GetWisdom, and today we're going to continue with the channeling series. And in this video, Karl is going to channel Dolores Cannon, who's quite famous in the world of hypnotism. She developed the quantum healing hypnosis technique, which a lot of people will note as QHHT, where a lot of her practitioners have actually built a career on doing this modality for clients and sharing it on their websites and on YouTube and various platforms. And she has passed now. Her daughter's continuing with the work at DoloresCannon.com, and people can still learn this hypnosis technique. Now, hypnosis is something Karl knows quite a bit about, and in Dolores's long and illustrious career, she got into a lot of different subjects, some of which we'll talk about today before we start the channeling, and also some of these questions will be included in the channeling itself. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and thank you especially, Karl, for doing this with us. We've been doing this for over 2 years now, and so I know you have some very valuable things to say about this whole world of hypnotism, and what information we get, what information we don't get. And so we should probably have a discussion about that before we start.
Well, I can offer some perspective. And, I was just thinking as you were introducing today's agenda that I'll let her speak for herself. It's appropriate. She's in light being mode. We can trust what she says. And some people might not like it if she even self-criticizes some of the things. But I think by and large, she's been a pioneer and a contributor. And not that I'm knowledgeable even about all of her work, because I haven't read all of her books. I'll confess that up front. I know of her, and I have at least one or two in my collection. And I was chatting with Denny before we started that my house is in a bit of disarray because I have house guests living with me. One of my sons and his family, and we've had to rearrange our vast holdings of books to clear out space for our guests. And, so even, knowing this is coming, I didn't have a chance to really kind of bone up a little and look at some things I might want to think about and maybe add to the list of questions or whatever but the idea of probing the mind is really important. And it's much more important than I ever understood. And that's because the mainstream has ignored this categorically for more than a century now. There are practitioners, and that's true of all the good things, the true things, the important things. Someone carries the torch, or maybe more than one someone, but it's not enough usually to get the mainstream motivated to do something. And there's a reason for that. It's actually an active disincentive that's created to have the opinion leaders dismiss certain approaches. And it's not taught then in the universities and in the educational programs in the graduate level and the professional schools. It might be given a token, so someone might go through an entire training as a PhD psychologist and maybe have one course in hypnosis just so they understand a little about that. And they might study some information that's been gleaned, but they won't be encouraged to use it as a primary modality in helping people with emotional problems. And in my opinion, it's a huge wasted opportunity. So that's my tip of the hat to Dolores Cannon, that she's been a champion in that arena and done some fine work, as far as I know and can tell, just from having bumped into the things that are talked about with her processes and so on.
Well, she came up in a time when she did this, when there wasn't a lot of reference material in the mainstream or even in the alternative. So she kind of had to forge her own road, and she got into this past life regression thing, and it opened up whole new vistas of inquiry, which she just took on without much guidance or reference material to go to. There's very little. There was a little bit, but nothing like what you see today. So she was a pioneer in many respects. Absolutely. And one of the things that she did was contacted a being that identified himself as Nostradamus, and she actually wrote books about clarifying some of the alleged predictions from Nostradamus. And I want to read off a list of 18 of these, because we're going to be referring back to this list in one of the questions during the channeling. But the other thing I want to bring up and have you comment on, Karl, before we continue, is this idea of vetting, of going back to people who had huge influence, like she did, in the alternative communities, in the truther, whistleblower, alternative, new age community, however you want to throw the labels around, because she's, we're always a little bit reticent and nervous about bursting bubbles or throwing people under the bus, that kind of thing. We have broached this subject in the past, and we try to be careful about it because our intention here is not to harm anybody. But with Carla Ruckert was an example. She was the channeled source for a lot of the Law 1 material, which has quite a few followers. And we learned some things that probably some of those followers would not be too happy to hear about. And there's a potential for the same thing happening here. And so I just wanted you to speak to this issue because it's important.
Yes, it is. It's central to the dilemma we're faced with right now, that the world isn't what it seems to be. There is a huge corruption and also an intrusion by interlopers from extraterrestrial civilizations. They are truly running the world. Now this guy's nuts. I'm out of here. So goodbye, those who are easily perturbed or offended. But I assure you, I am a down-to-earth person. I do know what I'm talking about, and I have multiple lines of evidence for what I'm saying, one of which I do channel the higher realms. and have been doing this for years and filling in blanks steadily by probing and asking questions. And it's surprising how few people know this basic fact. And it applies throughout human history. We've always been suppressed and subjugated, but it's done from behind the scenes using humans to do it for these interlopers. Right. So they control people sort of like the Praetorian Guard, the state police, the political minions who make certain decisions and often create disarray and lack of progress. And it all looks like, a little bit of craziness, but it's just human, we're imperfect, et cetera, et cetera. And people don't see anything more sinister in it than that. But I guarantee you, it is sinister, and it goes on routinely. And the problem for people who want to do well, the light workers, I like to call it, even though that's kind of got a new agey, not kind of, but it's quite a new age sort of terminology, which is a whole other discussion about its overall value and so on. But these are people who come in wanting to help the world, and they get managed, for one thing. And the reason is people like Dolores Cannon. They can turn over rocks and find the worms and sort out wrongdoing, potentially.
Yeah.
They may not make that their focus. They might want to be more in upliftment and getting some basic information and helping people a little bit with coaching and so on, what have you. And there's a place for all of those things. And I'm not trying to criticize anyone. No. But if you want to solve serious problems and do healing work, you need to know what is going on, what is the problem, and where it comes from. So the people who probe those things have the greatest potential for finding the deep truths. They may not, for a variety of reasons, but at least they're making the attempt. And so I really prize those sort of individuals. But I can tell you there are channelers, for example, right now, talking to high-level beings who are truly extraterrestrial psychics. They're flesh and blood beings who are using their psychic ability to tune into those who do an outreach, wanting to talk with a high-level figure, and they'll answer that outreach. They'll get there first and do a handshake, and then become a trusted source of information. And it's deeply corrupting. Mm-hmm. The hand-holding won't be immediately obvious. They're very good at this. They know how to push our buttons, satisfy our appetites. They know all about love and sweetness and light, and that we are yearning for something more, something better. And so they'll give us encouragement and give us promises of great things to come and so on. And that can keep people spinning their wheels and really not getting anywhere to solve the deep problems. And I see this all the time. I mean, there are channelers out there who are actually channeling high-level light beings, but they're personally corrupted to not think there's any darkness. Mm-hmm. Right. And they won't ask about it. Yeah. So the high-level light beings are unable to give them a heads up, give them something new, because that is a divine mandate. They're not allowed to lead the person. Right. So it falls back on human initiative and ingenuity to unearth new information, truly. Yeah. So when you tune into something and you hear a bunch of stuff brand new out of the box from out of nowhere, that is a sign. It's not a divine source. It's an interloper wanting to inject new information into the mix, into the dialogue. And this doesn't happen. The whole idea of, God came to me in the night and wanted me to write this new book, that does not happen. God does not make us do things. Right. It's only the people who go to God and ask for greater knowledge and insight
or can be answered. Another example could be an abduction that you didn't ask for. Right. You're in you're in the night freeze or whatever, and you can't move your body, and the next thing you know, you're up with on some ship somewhere, and this being comes up, and a lot of times they're described in glowing terms, and they get this download of all this wonderful information about the galaxy, the universe, about time travel, about your previous lives as an ET doing this and doing that, and then you come down, and then this becomes like a cosmology, a new worldview for you to promulgate to your fellow humans. I mean, that unfortunately is a pretty common story for a lot of people, whether it's under an abduction scenario or something that might be termed a lot more spiritual in terms of contact with other beings. And it's legion, and it fills up the pantheon of New Age material. And but in terms of our subject today, I would contend that Dolores was probably a mixture of those two things, where she actually was given a lot of valuable information, perhaps from a divine source. I'm kind of thinking that way, especially as it gets into the explanation she gives of the human's ability to perceive the phenomena of time correctly. I think she provided a lot of clarifications on that early on. I have peripheral knowledge of this. I have not read the book where she gets into an explanation of that, but I've seen some synopsises of what her work was in terms of clarifying that. And it's also possible that she did contact Nostradamus. Now, Nostradamus in this communication was characterized as him in his embodied, in his incarnation, actually doing this communication with her. He did not communicate with her as a light being, clarifying these predictions. So that's another very interesting kind of twist in this whole thing, as far as what she claims to have been able to do with Nostradamus, or the being identifying himself as Nostradamus. So anyway, there's 18 things I'm just going to read off here that were apparently clarified by Dolores Cannon in her work with the being claiming to be Nostradamus. And so I'm going to read these off, and then they're going to be referenced in question number 3 in the channeling. So the first one was these are predictions made by Nostradamus that was done in a very cryptic way in his writings, and then she subsequently clarified these in one or two of her books. So the first one is the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Number 2 is the attack of the flying birds into the city of Hollow Mountains, referring to the September 11th attacks. Number 3, the ensuing war in the Middle East. Number 4, the creation of supercomputers. Number 5, the rise of the internet, erratic weather patterns. Number 6 is the earth changes and the effects these changes will have on major countries and cities. Number 7 is the war in the Middle East. Number 8 is the Antichrist. Number 9, nuclear weapons. Number 10, AIDS originating in monkeys and its deliberate spread by world governments. Number 11, the British monarchy. Number 12, the state of the world subsequent to the shift. Number 13, the shift itself. Number 14, the breakup of the Soviet Union to various independent states. Number 15, the Pope. Number 16, the hidden information of great importance to mankind buried somewhere in the desert in the Middle East. Number 17, the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster. And number 18, visitations by extraterrestrial races. So we will be referring to this list in question number 3 during the channeling. I didn't want to read that whole thing in the middle of the question, just so the focus could be maintained. But anyway, that was those are some predictions that Nostradamus allegedly made, and then subsequently clarified by Dolores Cannon in her books. So I thought that was pretty interesting, because we have kind of a tie-in from a historical figure where she, fleshed out the details. Kind of what we do in the channeling series.
Well, I'm open, and I'm confident we'll get an accurate answer from her as a light being, because people who return home to the light and make it to that level are back in divine mode. They're a light being mode. They're above petty concerns we have as a physical human, concerned about our reputation and
Who said what? And
yeah, and really wanting justice for something that was done to us and so on. People understand that we're all struggling down here, and it's highly corrupt, and it's not so much the person's fault, it's the environment, the history that makes it so, and leads everyone into a state of confusion and working at cross purposes. So it doesn't accomplish anything to point fingers or assign blame, and they just don't do that because they know that it causes harm. So it's like adding another injury on top,
Right.
come and yell at you. You're lying in the dirt bleeding, What an idiot. You should have known better than to get on that bicycle at 75 or whatever. And, thank you for that
right.
insightful analysis. So, we'll see what she has to say about that. And
Okay.
I'm open. I really haven't looked into that body of work.
Yeah, I think this is going to be productive, and I just want to reiterate that this is kind of a follow on in the same manner as what we did with Carlo Ruckert, and the law of one material, the source of the law of one material, and we got some information that probably wasn't that much welcome for people who follow the law of one, but we got some clarifications and some helpful clarifications. And this is for, this is primarily gonna find resonance with those who have an open mind and are interested in the truth and want to see the dots connected in a way that makes sense, that are logical, that provide a further and more accurate explanation for what's happening in the world. Why are we here? What can we expect, and what are the challenges before us? That's the idea behind this, not coming in to correct what Dolores did or said.
No, absolutely not, because I don't engage in those sort of things. Sometimes it happens that we unearth some troubling issues and mixed blessings from someone and their contributions. It's unavoidable. It can't be helped. But that's not the point of the exercise. To me, this is all about highlighting what we can that's true in her work and her contributions, and paying our respects to someone who was truly a pioneer. The whole issue of studying the mind, in particular, as she did as a hypnotist, is a huge unmet need still.
Yes.
The mainstream has been corrupted to ignore hypnosis as a tool for helping people with emotional and physical health issues. And her work was instrumental in showcasing the potential for doing just that.
Yeah.
And continues to help people today. So this is something I know a lot about as a board certified hypnotist myself. I went into that arena following a career as a mainstream scientist. I was a pharmacologist, helping to develop new treatments for a broad array of serious health conditions. And then on my retirement, was able to explore some of the oddities I'd witnessed during the course of my life, one of which was this weird phenomenon of hypnosis. What does it mean? What does it tell us about the mind? What can we use it for that could be helpful? And to begin to dabble a little bit. And I became quite excited at what I saw. One of which was hypnotists are helping people.
Yeah.
They do all the time. And they have no credentials other than that they're a hypnotist. Yeah. And they get some sort of training. Yeah. They're not necessarily, almost certainly in the majority of cases, not psychologists or therapists, because the therapists aren't trained by and large to use that tool.
Right.
And there's a reason it's being held back from us. And, people are led away from it by the opinion leaders and the universities and the professional schools. And it's a sinister reality in the world. And it's interesting to me as well that going into the arena of hypnotism, to look at what it can do for emotional issues. That was my focus and my level of interest. But ironically, as I looked more at what they were doing, I learned that past life regressions can be quite authentic and have a place in helping people overcome problems.
Yeah.
That was a surprise to me. I thought, well, okay, it might be real that we've had prior lives, but I wasn't quite totally convinced. And to think that it has a great therapeutic benefit was a real stretch. I mean, it's over and done with.
Yeah.
It's another entire lifetime, separate from this one.
Yeah.
How can that possibly have something to do with today?
Right.
So
well, that's
I had a lot of learning to do.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned in her work where I think she helped clarify this whole time issue, this misperception of time and how it actually works and whatnot. And you know a lot about that. You're learning a lot about that, as we are, because you're sharing it with us. We just did some work on that recently about the whole phenomenon of time and how things work and don't work in with the whole aspect of time, everything in the now. She really helped to explain it. I think a lot of the explanations she provided were accurate. That's my sense of things. In other areas, I'm not sure, but that's why we're going to answer these questions. We've got 7 questions, and it's probably going to be a bit of a long channeling. We're going to cover a lot of ground here. So let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, we'll go for it and say hello to Dolores, and I'm looking forward to this. I have a lot of respect for anyone like her who has been a pioneer in this arena. It's helped many, many people. I am totally certain of it. It's one of the things that helped me become a spiritual person after a long time in the desert. Seeing evidence of past lives being a reality was a big convincer for me personally. There's something to this idea that there is an afterlife. People can come and go in different incarnations. I mean, that's real world evidence. Yep. Not just something in some esoteric scriptural writing and so on. And so, all right, so I will go ahead and get in the state of consciousness I need. I connect to people in the light through creator of all it is, God, Allah, whatever you want to call it. And I do that very specifically to avoid engaging an imposter. This is a common diversion that happens to people unwittingly because they're naive. They think if you reach out to the light, what can go wrong? You're reaching the light, I mean, it wouldn't allow some imposter to jump in.
Right.
But it's just like down here in the physical, they won't stop a crime underway. They have to let us engage with our free will. And it's the same with the would-be imposters from the interloper community. They have to be allowed to do what they choose. And if they jump in and pretend they're an archangel, the divine has to let that happen if we fall for it. So this is why I'm just stressing this point that you need to be careful and think carefully about what people are doing and what they're saying, and look for signs there might be a hidden flaw. If it's all happiness and sweetness and light, that's a big red flag that the person's getting a one-sided view of things. It might be through their choosing, but it might also be they're getting helped to stay in that mode. It's like putting blinders on. And then you're kind of like a spiritual Pollyanna. And people are trained all the time to not think about anything negative because it'll hurt them. The law of attraction, it will drag them down. They'll get more of it. Don't think about that. Go and think about positive things all the time. Focus on what you want, not what you don't want. Well, if you have schizophrenia, that's a big stretch, to just do that as though it was a magic solution. And it isn't a magic solution. So the divine has greater reach and greater power than we do. So we'll see what Dolores has to say about all this, and I'll go ahead and do what I promised here. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Dolores Cannon speaking.
Thank you for joining us. Were you able to transition successfully, or did you need a spirit rescue? And have you since reincarnated?
I was very fortunate and able to return to the light unharmed, although there were many beings lurking about, waiting to pounce and gain an upper hand with me. I, like many who do work for the light, as a being in the physical, when I come down and join the human community, are watched, are followed, are interfered with, are corrupted, and then attacked quite savagely on leaving the body at the end of the life. This is routine for your world, and the reason many humans are waylaid in this fashion. Most people get themselves into trouble by not being spiritual as a practice. This does require some devotion, some conscious, focused attention to tend to the need of the soul to be in alignment and to serve and contribute to the workings of the divine with what one does, day to day, even moment to moment. If everyone were to do that, the darkness would be pushed out and the world could return to a normal state of being. It is far from that at the current time. So I was blessed in being able to return despite being a kind of high value target in their way of thinking. There are multiple levels of interference with safe passage. The first being the dark spirits, as you have seen again and again and again, who strive to corrupt everyone and see everyone as their prey. And the extraterrestrials, whose dark spirits from their membership are also in the lower planes, looking for victims to cultivate, to soften them up for possession by dark spirits, and also to further the alien agenda in its subjugation and corruption of the world, to hold people back who could be a thorn in their side once again, should they reincarnate and resume the fine work they were doing. There are many levels, many reasons, but it has become a kind of prison in the lower astral plane for the would-be light workers, the helpers, the healers, and the bringers of light who help uplift humanity. They, in particular, are high focused and vulnerable potential victims unless they are given special protection and oversight. That can come through cultivating your belief in the divine and simple prayer work, asking for safety, and especially asking directly to the highest level of the divine realm, creator of all that is, for a safe passage, a safe return, a joyous reunion in the light, in anticipation of the end of life. Not everyone has that luxury in knowing it is coming. There can be sudden departures and so forth. But this is a message needing to be reinforced. And we very much want to acknowledge the work of your channel and you as a compatriot in helping so many struggling humans at a spirit form to make their way back to the light once again. This is a tremendous blessing and still little recognized that people are at risk and many have loved ones in this dire state of need and can use your services to right the wrong.
Okay, thank you. Have you since reincarnated?
We have not been back as yet.
Okay.
We plan to do so, and we cannot discuss the whys and where and so forth, but it will be in service once again. We are, in a sense, champing at the bit to do so because this is such a crucial period in human history. Things are coming to a head after many thousands and thousands of years. So there is no time to waste. There is everything at stake now. And this includes the entirety of the human community down to every last living soul.
Okay, thank you. Was your description of the custodians and their self-identification where you learned that almost all so-called abduction cases are actually mutual agreements made prior to incarnating for the purposes of helping one another, as explained in your books, accurate?